I am very honored to be with Elliott May, engineer at BME in Port Huron, Michigan. Welcome to the show, Elliott. Um,
Thank you for
I
having me, Noah.
You're welcome. You're welcome. This is great. I interviewed Elliott's father, Brett, a long time ago. It was a really interesting podcast. He had all kinds of interesting uh, inventions he brought on the show. Um, I'm I could try to summarize what your company does myself, but I'm just gonna, before we go any further, ask you to summarize BME in a nutshell.
Yeah, so BME makes custom attachments for the screw machine industry. So we make shave heads and recess attachments, things like that as well. But kind of our bread and butter is making custom attachments for our customers to solve their problems. And
Hmm.
that's what I really enjoy doing. And hopefully we can do that for a long time in the future. And we also rebuild Acme-Gridley screw machines as well. So we have a rebuild department and then an attachment department.
Right, and uh, you know what you told me before is that it's people come to you guys when they have a part they're making and they say you can't do this on an Acme. You
Yeah,
guys,
yeah, and we'll say, well, at least let us try.
exactly, exactly, because it's though cam screw machines, some would argue, are a dying breed. They can still crank out parts like nothing else, and to not have to buy a CNC machine or a CNC multi-spindle machine that's going to be $1 million, like it's 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 great if you can come to somebody like BME, that's going to uh, make something that isn't quite as complicated as, say, even putting a CNC slide on a machine, which you guys do, correct? You do
That's
make
correct. Yep,
CNC,
yep, we
but
do. Yeah, we
that's
have a.
not your first option, right? When somebody will come to you and they want to do a second op on a machine, um, your first notion isn't let's go to CNC slide, correct?
Well, I mean, it would depend on the application. If somebody's got a thread on a thin piece of aluminum that they can't roll, and it's like, well, that might be something to look at. But if they're trying to drill a cross hole or something, then we look at it and try to find an attachment that we've made that fits that. And then if we haven't made that attachment before, then we would brainstorm and come up with a solution for them.
Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, I want to get to the attachments in just a minute, but first, I want you to give me a very brief life story of how you got into the business. Give me the 3-minute bio.
So I grew up always being pretty mechanically inclined. I think I get that from my dad because he's very, very mechanically inclined and he works with his hands. So I kind of inherited that from him. So from a young age, this was my first job at BME. So I just started out in the shop, running some of the simpler equipment and helping produce parts. And then I moved into shipping and receiving here at BME, and then eventually into the engineering. I did take a little hiatus and I moved out to Colorado for a little bit,
Oh,
but then I came back and took the engineering on full time, and I've just kind of tried to keep growing in that, and that's where I'm at currently. So
okay. So your father, Brett, he started the company 15 years ago.
that's correct. Yeah, 15 years in 2022. So
Okay. And then you started coming to the shop when you were what, 14 or
14. Yeah, yeah.
14? That's funny because I was talking to him before and he said 12, but you would know better.
Well, I was probably at the shop, but I don't know if I was working at 12.
Hmm. So you started coming to the shop, and what were you doing when you first came to the shop?
So I'd run our bandsaw. So we used to get our steel in just in longer bars. So I'd look at the prints and cut the steel to length. So pretty early process, but a lot of the parts that we made came through there. So
Hmm.
I just had the blocks of steel in my hands, and it was kind of a dirty job, and it wasn't too complicated, so it worked well for a 14-year-old.
Sure. And then you did some other jobs working up through high school?
Well, I just worked here,
No, but
but
I mean at the shop. What did you
yeah.
do anything else?
So I did the shipping and receiving for a little while, and then I eventually moved into doing the assembly of the attachments. So I really enjoyed that a lot because as being mechanically inclined, and I like putting stuff together, you know what I mean? It was a very satisfying process. So for a couple of years, I put most of our attachments together,
And
including
you
recesses,
knew
shaves.
you knew that this was the thing that made you tick. Just
Yeah, I loved it. I really enjoyed coming to work, and having solving problems, whether it be putting an attachment together or something else in the shop. I Like I said, I just really enjoy that, putting things together. It was
it
very
seems
satisfying.
like it. It just seems like you have a passion for it. Um, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what you guys do at BME, because I think we have a lot of listeners out there that they used to have multi-spindles, um, and they just run CNCs right now, or maybe people that run CNCs and they're sort of intrigued by those beasts, with multi-spindles that can churn out parts by the millions. But people have labeled them archaic, um, primitive. People, they're disenchanted with them because of several different, they take more operations to do, or it's hard to find people to run them. So tell me a few of the cool tricks you guys have come up with, cool attachments. First met Brett May from BME, working for Graf Pinkert. He had come and put some attachments on a Wickman machine. Um, yeah, so tell us about a few of the things you've done. You've brought a few things with you on video, so I want you to hold those up and give a very, very detailed description of it for people that aren't watching. And
Yeah. So
yeah, give us a picture.
the first one I'll show a polygon part, a polygon milled part. So on this part, it's got a hex on it, but you can see that hex has a smaller width than the diameter of the part. So you can't buy hex stock. So you have to mill it on your machine. So we have an attachment this is one of our kind of bread and butter attachments. We really enjoy this attachment. We've made a lot of them.
What is it called? A polygon? What?
Polygon mill.
Okay, sure.
So that same attachment can produce a hex on a part like this, or with a slate gearing change can produce a thread milled part. So you put a thread mill cutter on it, and then that attachment can come in and thread mill the part as well. So we really enjoy that attachment, and I've made a lot of those, and I've designed a lot of the tooling for those, so I like those. But then
Were people, could if could you buy something like that from somebody else as well, or is this something that you guys have come up with your own design on?
we've come up with our own design on it, but I know that we do have one or two competitors out there that make something similar.
Okay,
Uh, I believe that ours are a lot more robust, and they're very, they're sturdy attachments, and
sure.
I really enjoy that about them. I like the gearing options that we have with them. For a lot of the sizes, you can switch between either a 1-to-1 attachment for thread milling, or like a 2-to-1 attachment if you want to produce a hex on a part.
Okay,
That same attachment can also produce like two flats across from each other, so it doesn't have to be a hex. But you just change the gearing, either the gearing or the amount of cutters that you have, or something like that, and then you can produce like 2, 3, 1, or 6 flats on a
okay,
part. So it's pretty versatile in the different shapes that you can generate.
sure. What else do you got?
Yeah, so I have this part, which it's the part itself is very simple. It has a hole in it, and then some features. But you
So
can see that there's
it's like a cylindrical part. How big is it? Like 1 inch diameter?
it's maybe 5/8 diameter, somewhere in
Okay.
there. But you can see that around the side of it, there are 4 holes that are all perpendicular to each other. And
Hmm.
the holes themselves are maybe a 16th. So they're fairly small. And then they break through into the ID of that part. So we made that part on an Acme-Gridley without stopping the spindle, and it was all in process. There's no secondary work done to this part. So that attachment syncs up with the spindle in whichever position you choose to mount it in. It mounts on the tool slide, and then it moves forward on the index. And then as they're synced up, it drills 4 holes that are perpendicular to each other as the whole unit is turning.
That's really interesting. Do you think
That was
most?
one of the first attachments that we made at BME. So Brett made that in the little CNC shop in his barn. So that attachment has a lot of history with us.
Yeah, well, that doesn't sound like something that you know a lot of I've never had anybody tell me that they could cross drill without spindle stopping on a cam multi-spindle. So that seems pretty interesting to me.
Yeah,
Um,
I've never seen another attachment like it myself. That's not to say it's not out there, but I haven't seen it yet.
yeah. Now, what else do you got?
So this is a shave roll bracket that we designed and manufactured. So
Hmm.
this mounts on a shave head, and I don't have a roll for it right now, but the roll goes in here, right, through that hole, or the roll pin goes through there. And then instead of
Yeah,
going into your machine,
keep holding up. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Instead of going into your machine and cracking a couple bolts loose, making an adjustment on an adjustment screw with a wrench, you can instead reach in, and then this little dial turns, and it's spring loaded, and every click changes your part by a couple tenths as it rolls. So it just pushes the roll up just a little bit instead of having to adjust it and using some finesse. Your operator can lean in there, click it a couple times, and then now your part's within tolerance.
Very
So
cool.
yeah, this bolts on the customer's shave head. So we've made them for a couple different sizes, and we're expanding that product line right now.
So some of these attachments, I mean, how many of those can you sell? Like the stuff you've just shown me, have you sold hundreds of them, or?
Yeah, I mean we've sold a lot of these fine adjust roll brackets. The first customer that we made them for, actually, they bought a couple at the start, and then they got them, and then a couple months later we got an order for 20. So they started using them, and they loved them so much they put them on all their machines. So now every time we sell them a shave head, they also order one of those fine adjust roll brackets, and they've been a pretty good customer of ours. So
Sure.
there's definitely a need for something like that, and that company, it works really well for, and they went and they converted all their machines to have those. So
How much does that cost?
this costs I believe this one costs about $1,500.
Okay. Okay.
So it is a little bit pricey, but there's some nice things on it, and it saves your operator a lot of time and a lot of headache when they're trying to bring a part into tolerance.
Sure. Sure. And what about the other attachments that you showed? How much do you think those would cost?
Um, I'd have to look up the pricing on the cross drill, but a polygon unit costs about 13,000,
Okay.
depending on the size of machine, because they do scale up and down depending on, if you're working on a 3/4, it's going to be a lot smaller unit than a 2 5/8. So yeah.
Isn't it amazing how you can buy an Acme for 25 grand, 15 grand, yet then there's an attachment on it that costs
That's
more than
worth
the
it.
machine?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, but if that attachment saves you a secondary operation,
Sure.
then you remove that whole the moving the parts, the machining the parts, you know, you remove that whole operation from your part process, and that can be extremely valuable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How often are you coming up with some like totally new innovation or even a slight tweak on a part that you guys haven't done before?
Yeah, I'd say for slight tweaks to attachments, all the time. I usually have something on my desk that I'm taking attachment that we have that I'm, converting it, making it slightly different, like a polygon. I usually have. It's pretty frequent where I need to design a little bit of tooling or something like that, or different attachments, like tweaking them in some way to where it works for the customer's application. I'd say that's pretty frequent. And then a fresh design is a few times a year, from something that we've completely never made before. Uh, so
Sure.
a completely new attachment
What's
is a few
something
times.
that this year, this is the first podcast of 2022. So what was something notable that you guys came up with in 2021? Something totally new, or at least like a really significant, um, alteration on something?
Yeah, so one of the attachments that we made this year was an offset synchronous milling attachment. So if you have a part, I don't have one in front of me, but if you have a part that has a slot from the end, if it's closer to the center line, then we've done that before, and I'm pretty proud of those attachments, the synchronous milling. But we had a customer who had a need to where they needed to put a flat on the side of a part that was very offset and deep from the center line. So in that case, we couldn't use the mill that we had because it's designed to be closer to the center line. But then on this one, we made the head much wider and then offset the blade on it to where it looks pretty cool. And there were some different counterweighting challenges to where while it's synced up with the spindle, it needed to not throw itself out of tolerance from the weight. So there were some unique challenges with that. But yeah, so an offset synchronous milling attachment was one of the cooler ones from this year.
Interesting. Interesting. And then the company has an Acme rebuilding business, and you have an interesting synergy between the two businesses. Tell me about that. I'm assuming this year you've been just slammed with work on that.
Yeah, we definitely have a few projects that are even still ongoing. We've shipped a couple machines this year as well, so that's always good. Brett heads up the rebuilding department, so he's over there a lot, instructing the workers on how to do certain things. And yeah, so we fully rebuild Acme's. We'll tear them right down to the casting, sandblast them, paint them, and then start putting them back together, regrind the carriers, all that kind of fun stuff, and then put new bearings in and refurbish the machine to what it once was. And then in that process, a lot of times our customers will have us upgrade the clutches or other things like that to where now they have a new and improved machine. And then at the same time, if the customer wants to tool up the job at the same time, then we'll supply the attachments for that as well. So
Do they
in that
usually
way,
want you guys to turnkey the machines for them?
yeah, I'd say it's about 50-50. About half and half want a full turnkey, and then about the other half wants the machine, maybe a couple holders on it, but I'd say we run off about half the jobs that we get.
If you turnkey a machine, and I know you can't really answer this because it all depends on the part, but how much more would a machine? Okay, so I'm gathering like a rebuilt 8 spindle Acme. You're talking 250 to 350 grand rebuilt. I know nobody's gonna like hold your head to the fire and say, what the hell are you quoting this for? But what that's about the scale, right? About 250 to 350.
Depending on the features and stuff, yeah.
Okay. And then how much more would a turnkeyed machine cost than a not turnkeyed? That's the price for a not turnkeyed machine?
That would probably be close to the price for a more turnkey solution to where we run off the part in house and make sure that everything works good and all that kind of thing. All the attachments and stuff work good. It really depends um, on what the machine is, how the machine kind of starts, and that kind of thing. If the customer is supplying a machine, that really changes things as well. And then
Sure.
what features the part has have a dramatic difference on kind of the bottom line.
Do you guys prefer to rebuild a customer's machine or to provide a new machine for the customer. I know Graf Pinkert, we've always preferred to take a trade in and provide a new machine, but many people have differing opinions on that. What's a better business model? What makes more sense?
It really just depends on the customer's need. I wouldn't say we have a huge preference on either one. Uh, I like having the machine in house and then, you know, rebuilding that one and either taking a customer trade or just selling it to them. I enjoy that myself, but it just depends. I couldn't give you a true answer on which one's better, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, you can be frank with this, or, you know, you may not even really know. It may just change. But what do you think is a better money-making business, the rebuilding these big beasts or selling creative attachments? I know that they go together, but
Right.
like, I know from Graf Pinkert that Wickmans are easier to rebuild than Acme's, and we don't do, even though we take them down pretty far, we still don't do nearly what you guys would do with an Acme, as far as grinding the stem, and, you know, there's all the cams to change, etc. It just seems like a really difficult business. Now, you guys have a great expertise and people dedicated to doing that, but yeah, what do you think is an easier business to make money in?
Well, I think, like you said, they do kind of go hand in hand, because while the attachment business is profitable, and we build some cool attachments for our customers, and it keeps us busy. Uh, it's more frequent, you know what I mean. But when you rebuild a whole machine, then that's of course going to cost more than a polygon.
Sure.
So it just kind of depends, and I'd
You
say
need
that.
both. You need both, though, for the
Right.
company to, make their bottom line. You really need both businesses.
For us, it works really well having both. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have so much respect for being able to rebuild any kind of machine, taking it down to nothing. But Acme's, they are difficult, and
They are a beast. That's
every
true.
used machine has a different story behind it, and you have no idea why it's there, right? Like, why did somebody get rid of it? Why did,
Right.
like,
Yeah. And a lot of times the machine was running, and then either the company closed or was sold, and they no longer have a need for that machine. So then it produces some even more interesting questions where, okay, this machine was still running, so how much rebuilding do we need to do on it, and all that.
absolutely,
So
that is an interesting question, because you guys, you provide, like, a warranty generally.
yeah.
And I ran into this with your dad recently when I don't know if we ended up making the deal or not, but we were trying to partner on a machine together. And there was a question of, like, what does this customer want? How much, because you guys have a different expectation when you sell a machine than we do, particularly an Acme. If we sell a Wickman, okay, we can support it. If we sell an Acme, it's like, we'll make sure everything goes fine, but we're not going to be able to send anybody out in the field, and we're just not going to make a promise like that.
Right.
So yeah, I can totally tell that you run into an interesting issue of how much do you want to do to it? Because some people, some rebuilders, depending on the machines, they just say it's all or nothing.
Right.
We just take it down to nothing, or else. But you guys will do something in between, if it makes sense.
Yeah, if that's what the customer has a desire for, and they have a machine where, hey, I just need the carrier taken apart, reground, and the new bearings in it, stuff like that, then we'll do that. And then do our best to make sure everything else on the machine runs good. But that really depends on the machine, and the arrangement that we make, at the time.
Right. But I mean, if you say found a machine that somebody else wanted to sell, and then you had a customer for it, then you run into this sort of in-between area. And it felt to me like your philosophy was go all out, try to make sure everything was like perfect, because which, everybody should do, but it seemed like Brett really wanted to, make sure everything was guaranteed with it, before they sent it out, which, that's a great thing. It's just, it's hard to guarantee used equipment.
Right. Yeah. And our definitely our warranty is a little more firm on the machines that we completely rebuild, tear it down to nothing, and then put it back together. But then it from stuff beyond that and stuff that's not a full rebuild, then it just kind of depends, on the arrangement that's made.
Sure. Um, Now people ask us this question all the time, with Graph Pinkert. Um, cam screw machines, where is it going? It seems like it's here for this foreseeable future, particularly in maybe even outside of the United States. But you guys, your business model relies on people buying Acme's, New Britain's, maybe Wickman's, Davenport's. You guys have done Davenport's even, right? A little bit.
We built attachments for Davenport's.
Right. So whether it's the attachments business or the rebuilding business, where do you see this business going? Do you see it as the rebuilding business as something that's going to continue to grow, or just kind of like pretty much just stay steady?
I definitely think that there's grounds for it to grow. That's for sure. I think in order for that to happen, people need to have an awareness that cam machines are still relevant, because with how high volume the machines are, it's hard to produce the same volume or
Absolutely.
the same cost on a CNC. So I definitely think for the foreseeable future, there's going to be a place for them in the market, because, from hose fittings to, parts for cars or whatever, we're still going to have those things. We're still going to have hydraulic fittings. Your high-low still needs cables.
Right.
It has to go together somehow. So
Right. And
somebody's
if you're
got to
going to
make those
buy an
parts.
index, you're going to have to charge $1 a part, and you can't be doing that. So you
Right. Yeah.
need, right. But, yeah, it must be something in the back of your minds. Do you have any, um, thoughts about other types of attachments you may be wanting to get into in the future? Have you, this is probably a dumb question, but like, have you made anything that can go on CNC machines, like on us, like be put on a Swiss machine or put on a CNC lathe, or is that basically left up to other companies that do that?
It depends on if someone brings that challenge to us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely, I wouldn't say I'm afraid of, looking at something like that and seeing if it's something that we can do. A lot of our customers are more cam machine shops, so that tends to be the problems that they have, or the challenges that they face.
Sure.
Well, we do make some holders and things for like a CNC machine, like different cutoff holders and stuff like that for kind of turret machines. Uh, we
Hmm.
make that kind of stuff that perhaps like Empire Tool used to make, that kind of thing. Um, but right now that's kind of it. I did have a customer that was looking at getting a shave head to put on a Swiss machine. I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is interesting. So what ended up happening with that? Did you actually
It's
make
still
it?
it's still pending, but hasn't gone through yet. But we'll see.
It always, I always got the impression that you guys were just sort of like very open-minded. It was like, okay, you want me to do this? All right, we're gonna like give it a go. And like, really, it doesn't seem like you guys say, um, no, that's impossible a lot. You kind of really try to figure it out. I'm sure you do. You are straight with people sometimes though, and just go, sorry.
Yeah, you have to be. because sometimes some things aren't realistic, but and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. But a lot of the times, if a problem's brought to us, we're gonna do our best to figure out what we can do on it. And we never say that something's, I can't do this without looking into it a lot further,
Sure.
because
Sure.
I don't want somebody to call and be like, no, I can't do that. Sorry. Click. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be a part of that kind of company, because that's not what we stand for. We want to solve our customers' problems. And to do that, you have to look into them, and so that's
Sure.
what we try to do.
Sure. Um, so let's shift gears a little bit. Family business. Um, you work with your dad. I work with my dad. Uh, I noticed that you refer to your dad as Brett. Um, I've often run into this talking to other dealers or other kinds of customers who have a similar way about it. Why why do you refer to your dad as Brett when you're talking about him in the third person?
That's just kind of what I've always done, and I found that for us that works really well. So that now when I go out to the shop and I want to talk to somebody, and it's like I'll go ask Brett, you know what I mean, instead of I'll go ask my dad. I'll go ask my dad if that's okay. I'll go ask Brett if that's okay. So for us that works. And starting here so young, and
Mm-hmm.
working out in the shop, I had a desire to not necessarily fit in, but work well with the other people that were out in the shop. And I was the only kid working here, so I kind of had to find my place in that, and you know not have people disrespect me because of who I was. So I kind of tried to mitigate that a little bit, just to show that he's still the boss, you know what I mean. And when I talk to him face to face, I call him dad, of course,
Yeah, it
because
always weirds me out when people and no offense if people do this, because I know that there's people with perfect relationships with their parents that do this, but when they call their parents by their first names, like to their face, I always find it a little weird. Don't you find that weird?
I do, yeah, and I try to avoid it. I catch myself sometimes, like if I'll say "Excuse me, Brett," when he's talking to other people or something, I'll do that, but that's about it. I don't come into his office and say, "Hey, Brett," because he's my dad.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I don't know. I it just to me it seems like it's dysfunctional or something, but I could be totally wrong. Um, so you you came to work when you were really young, um, and you've got an interesting thing to navigate with, uh, because you're you're not the boss. You may be, maybe you are the boss. I don't exactly know the dynamic, but you're not the owner um, at this point, correct?
Right? Yeah, no, he's the boss.
Right, but you're still not exactly the same as a regular employee. Um, is it what is that like? Do you feel like you've been able to navigate that well?
I think so, and I think I've been able to navigate that well for a couple reasons. And one is that I've tried to stay, in my place. I try not to, overextend my reach, and I've tried not to do that, over the years, especially when I was, 17, 18. I didn't have any authority here. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't the person calling the shots, and I wasn't the one making the decisions. So I definitely tried to keep that in mind. Um, but yeah, other than that, I really try to, when people start, I try to make an impression that I understand that I'm the boss's kid, and you may or may not have had an experience where the boss's kid took advantage or something like that. But I want to show that I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? I've done most of the jobs out in the shop, and I try to be very knowledgeable about that. And I try to, be a good leader, not because I'm the boss's kid, but because I know what I'm talking about, and I put the work
Sure.
in to, you know, understand what's going on in the shop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's impressive. As you know, you're 23. um, I'm, I'm just about 42, and it's still, there's just sort of an interesting dynamic where you're not exactly one thing, you're not exactly the other thing.
It's a fine line, that's for sure, and it's a difficult field to navigate, especially having people who work for us that are 55.
Right, and
And
have been there longer than you.
right, well, as of now, I've been here the longest. I'll hit 8 years this year, and I think I've been here the longest. Our previous employee who worked here, she retired, so
Well, that helps then.
it does. It does.
That
Yeah,
helps
that makes it a
because,
little bit easier. Yeah.
right, for me, I've been there a little while now, but if somebody's been at Graf Pinkert twice as long as me, it's an interesting dynamic. Um, so okay, so you work closely with your dad when it comes to the attachments, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So what is your role versus his role? Where how are you? Yeah, how does it how are you guys working together?
Yeah, I'd say he's the idea guy. He looks at a customer's problem and he comes up with, okay, I know in my head how I want this to happen. And then I try to take those ideas and then put them on paper. And so we go back and forth a lot on, okay, how do you imagine this working? And okay, what does this look like with the material that we have available, or the space that we have available, the mounting, all the stuff like that. So yeah, I'm the one that puts it in CAD or on paper, and he's the one that starts the idea process.
I'm just imagining you two like in front of a whiteboard, and like one of you guys is like
Absolutely. Yeah,
drawing it and the other
we have
one.
a few whiteboards that we go back and forth with on you know every other day. We're drawing something else on the whiteboard, trying to come up with a different solution, or talking about something that works better versus something that doesn't.
Yeah, that's great. No, I that sounds like a cool environment. I suppose some you could sort of make the comparison with my dad and I. Once in a while we'll be like figuring a deal with a bunch of machines, and my dad likes to get on the whiteboard and like, you know, write a whole bunch of different prices, and then of course he doesn't use a calculator. He's got to add it all up in his head.
Right. Yeah. I prefer calculator myself.
Yeah. Does your dad work it out in his head?
He
All
works
his
out a lot of stuff in his head.
arithmetic? Yeah.
He's got this old calculator that he uses that I swear is 10, 15 years older than I am, and I can't even figure out how to use it. But I have my own. I have a graphing calculator that I like a lot. Make life easy.
Yeah. What what is the most difficult thing about working with your dad? Or maybe it's not hard at all.
We've been fortunate that we think very similarly. So
Yeah.
we have a good chemistry. One thing that I'd say that has been one of the most difficult things, and I kind of touched on it a minute ago, but it was knowing my place a little bit, especially growing up and starting here at 14, and then now I'm 23. So I've been here a fair amount of time.
Hmm.
So especially when I was younger and kind of knowing my place, and because I wasn't the boss, you know what I mean? I wasn't the boss. I didn't know what I'm talking about, and I don't have any authority. And I kind of had to remind myself of that because I'm not the one. I wasn't the running the show. You know what
So
I mean?
you wanted to like go and say, well, what about X? And it was kind of like, wait a second here. It was kind of
Well,
like that.
he's always been good at hearing me out and listening to my ideas and stuff like that, and we've had good chemistry there. But it was more like at the end of the day, it's his decision what happens. You know what I mean? It's not mine. So that
Sure.
was I was like I wanted certain things to happen maybe that in his perspective, which was the right perspective, weren't the right things to do. But I didn't understand that at the time.
Right. And
Yeah.
now probably sometimes you say that and he goes, oh, well, yeah, maybe you're right about that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We have a good chemistry. We think very similarly, and we feed off of each other with certain ideas. And uh, I like to think we help make each other better. Even
That's so
though
good.
he is still the boss, and he definitely has the authority, but I think in certain things I try to challenge him a little bit. though it is difficult because he is a very wise man, and I gotta remember that.
No, but that's great if you can challenge him and that he's good about it. I feel similar with my dad. Um, and once in a while, I think I'm so right about something, and then he says, "No, I'm doing it my way," and everybody in the office will be like, What the heck is he doing?" And then sometimes he totally right. We all feel stupid after that.
Yeah. That's
Sometimes
the
I think that I am right and he wasn't right, and
um, that's the curse of being a business owner, right? You probably have to make
exactly.
you have to make the decision, even though nobody else might agree. Everybody else might tell him that he can't do it, but that takes a determination to push past that and make something happen that you have the vision on, that you can see it happening, and then just sticking with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of perspective. Um, so everybody's always talking about young people. Can't get young people into manufacturing. And this is gonna, hurt this country. And why can't we change this? Okay, so you're 23, you are mechanically inclined, you had a great opportunity. Um, so you're in this racket. But you see your peers around you. You saw people in high school, people who went. You went to a what exactly was your education track?
Yeah, so I started off in high school, and then I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity where I did. It's almost like a dual enrollment. A lot of places have that where your junior and senior year, some people will go to high school in the morning and then college in the afternoon. Instead of doing that, I just went after my 10th grade year of high school. I went to college full time. So I kind of cut my high school education off a little bit short, and then ended up getting my diploma later. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I met a lot of different people there, and I spent a lot of my time kind of in the engineering and mathematics, building. So that's cool. What my kind of education was like.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think an opportunity like that for more people might cause more people to go into trades, might go into engineering, or
I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of people. I think I was very blessed to be able to do that. And then, um, there's certain avenues at the college that you can take where they're more trade focused. Like there were some shop classes, and there were some, machining classes and stuff like that. And I think that's really important. And I think a lot of colleges should offer that, especially community colleges, because those are foundational. You know what I mean? For a lot of people, it's a lot more affordable. You know, and so I think having that opportunity to go into a more manufacturing environment, or at least seeing what it's like and seeing what you can do, uh, is very valuable. Yeah.
sure, sure. Um, why do you think that, you know, we're having trouble getting more kids to go into manufacturing?
So my perspective on this is that I think uh, decades prior, there was an atmosphere that was created by more management that was, you come in, you do your job, you go home. You keep your head down, you do what you're going to do, and then you go. And I think as a culture, we've more shifted to where that doesn't cut it anymore. People
Mm-hmm.
want to come to work and feel supported and feel like their opinion matters, and that they're making a difference in the company that they work for. And I think that's where we can see a lot more growth in younger people getting involved in manufacturing, especially, and stuff like that, because that's where my environment is. That I try to get people, excited about coming to work in a manufacturing environment. And I think that a lot of that comes down to the leadership of management, and
Mm-hmm.
how, if you're asking somebody to come into work every day, the machine's filthy, you're going to get covered in oil, you're going to get covered in chips, and that sucks. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to work for somebody like that. But instead, if they come in and management, it's like, I understand that right now, the oil's a problem, you're getting some chips on it. How do we figure out how to do that better? How can I help you do your job better? You know what I mean?
You're really way ahead of your time. You've been going
I
to
try to
those.
be.
Yeah. You've been like reading business books and
Yeah, actually, yep. So my dad's given me a couple books to read and or listen to. I listen to them on my
me too.
drive.
I only listen to books. I don't read.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have to drive anyway to work, so
What have
might
you
as well.
listened to?
The E Myth was a big one that I really enjoyed.
The E Myth?
Yeah. So it's
I
about
don't know that one.
yeah, it's about kind of entrepreneurship and how the transition goes from being how a lot of small businesses go from somebody who worked for a big corporation and said, okay, I want to start my own business, and what
Hmm.
that transition kind of looks like and things to keep in mind. And I thought it was really interesting. He talked a lot about, uh, I
Who's that
forget which
by?
one. I forget, yeah, but it's
Okay.
called the E Myth.
Like
Um,
letter E and then myth.
yes, yeah,
Totally.
but
It's a
he
good
talked a lot
voice
about
because the
like
voice is
McDonald's.
so important on the audiobooks.
Um, he talked a lot about like McDonald's and how that's like a franchise company. You know, how do you
Hmm.
set up your company to where if you wanted, you could expand it, and kind of
Mm.
talking about, okay,
Scale it.
that ends up being the most efficient way to do things. You know what I mean? If you make your company scalable, then you have a lot of good opportunities. So, or it sets you up well, I'd say. So that's kind of what I keep in the back of my mind is, you know, we're talking about different decisions with the business or other stuff. If Brett, you know, bounces ideas off of me, then um, I try to keep that kind of thing in the back of my mind. Like, is this going to be efficient? Is this scalable? Stuff like that.
Yeah. No, we should talk shop about some more books and podcasts and stuff. I probably I'll have to check that out. Um, have you listened to like the Dale Carnegie, like how to make friends in what is it?
I
In,
haven't, no, but my dad and I have been watching a lot of like Facebook videos, honestly, about different motivational speakers and stuff like that, like some Dave Ramsey and some
uh,
Simon Sinek. He's very, I
oh,
think
I've
he's
heard
a
of
very
Simon Sinek. Yeah.
wise individual. Yeah. So we talk a lot about what he says actually and how, you know, what that looks like. And yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll totally have to go over that. Um, I just think that people of all ages now, but I mean particularly, I hate to say it, but I just have trouble even putting my brain in the brain of somebody who's in their early 20s. But I just feel like we're so used to watching screens, having our phone at our hip. Um, so the idea of running a big steel tank that doesn't have a computer screen on it
Mhm.
um, for hours on end, uh, that's not clean, that's noisy. I mean, look, yes, you can keep an Acme clean, but it's still, you're going to get your hands
Yeah.
dirty.
Yeah.
I think there's a disconnect. Do you think
Yeah.
so
I
or
mean,
not? You think it
I
can be
think so too.
changed?
I think there's definitely a push with the culture that's currently happening with technology that everybody wants to switch everything to, you know, technology, and everybody loves the newest gadgets and stuff like that, which are great. I love technology as well. But I
And that's
definitely,
good. And it is good for getting people into manufacturing too, because people go, ooh, computer, CNC machine.
right,
Okay, I dig this. But to get
right.
somebody to run an Acme, it's different.
Right. And I definitely think, and I found that there is something gratifying about taking, you called it the other day, a beast, you know what I mean? An Acme is a bit of a beast, and you have to tame it. And once you do, it's really gratifying, you know, and you get that big machine that doesn't listen to you, and you tweak it in into where it can make high volume, good parts, then there's something really gratifying about
I'm
that.
sure.
And setting up a job and then having the parts and holding the parts in your hands and looking at numbers and saying, okay, I see that last month we made this many parts, but I made these tweaks. Now the machine's cleaner, it runs better,
And
and
also,
I
there's
produced
something
10% more
gratifying
volume.
about doing something on it that other people said couldn't be done, which is why
Exactly.
they'd
Yep.
come to you.
Yep. I've always found that even when I modeled up my first attachment, that we just had to do a little engineering on a high-speed drilling unit, and it was just a spindle, some bearings, and a spacer. That was it. And I remember modeling it up, you know, going through the whole process, watching the parts get made in the shop, and then holding it in my hand in the end It was really satisfying, you know. So that was kind of cool.
I bet. I bet. Just a couple more questions. Um, what is something that you learned in the last week about anything? Doesn't have to do with the business.
Something I learned in the last week. I'd say
Could be
just
like
with
a
different.
statistic about a sports team, or it could be a piece of news, or it could be anything.
Well, I'll say something about work is that you know, I think a lot of people should be given an opportunity in the environment that they work in, that being patient and explaining a situation to somebody is definitely better than having an aggressive mentality. And I think that's something that's just highlighted itself to me in the last week. um, that sometimes that's an employee is going to respond a lot better to somebody who wants to help them versus somebody who is just like, shut up and do your job. Because I think in today's environment that just doesn't work. And that was really highlighted to me in the last week, and that's why I've been talking about it so much, because it's something that is really important to me. So
Wow, very interesting. Um, and just another question I sometimes ask people is, when you think of the word happiness, what does it make you think of?
I think happiness comes from doing things in your day-to-day life that um, aren't necessarily always glamorous, but at the end of the day, you can go to sleep and you can think, I was a good husband or I was a good man today. So I got married this year, and that's been something that's,
No,
you know,
mazel tov.
shown itself. Yeah. But yeah, going to bed and not regretting anything you did that day, you know what I mean? Or and thinking, yeah, I made good decisions today, you know what I mean? I might not have been, the best person in the whole world at this one thing, but you know what, I made my wife happy, or I made her dinner and she didn't expect that. And you know thinking that at the end of the day is something that's very valuable, I
That
think.
is a great answer. Um, well, uh, I just thank you so much for doing the interview, and I look forward to you know seeing you out in the field, hopefully in the future. I've always, I see Brett, but it would be fun if you could come over to Graf Pinkert sometime. And yeah, I just loved getting to talk to you and meet you, and wish you all the best. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope to see you out at Brett and I'll try to make a trip over to Graf Pinker to see you and go from there.
Awesome. Thank you.